I remember as we were walking through from that part where he got off the plane to the exit of the airport, we were walking and Prabhupada stopped to tell Sri Govinda, who at the time had his tilak all the way back. It was just all the way back like this, and he stopped. He said, "This is not a racing stripe. This is tilak. It stops at the forehead." So that was the first instruction that I knew for sure, that how to put tilak on, you know. And as we were walking, it was very great that somehow or another it was arranged so that I could be right there in the very front as Prabhupada was coming and watching him dancing in front of him. And I could see the direction he was heading for. He was heading to a door that was an entrance door. It didn't, like if he stepped on the carpet there, it wasn't going to open. It was for the entrance. So I could see that that was the case. So I ran ahead and pulled the door open for him. And when Prabhupada walked by, he said, "Thank you," you know. And here I am, you know, Bhakta Butterfly, you know, and I'm just like, God, you know, it was like the greatest thing in the world. He actually said something to me, you know. And then everybody else all staunch and all, of course, very fixed up, everybody, you know, in those days. So, and then that was it until we got back to the temple. And that was also my initiation time, also the very next day. And the Radha Damodar bus was there, so there was a lot of devotees being initiated that day. And prior to this date, about a month before the publication of what was that book? The Nectar of Instruction, come out, and the announcement of the Radha Kunda had now for the first time reached the world. No, you know, it was just in the last month that people has actually heard of the Radha Kunda. So as the devotees were being initiated and being called up to get their beads, there was a lot of errors. There was a lot of devotees, like when they would, you know, pay directly their obeisances to Srila Prabhupada straight ahead, their rear ends would be at Kishore Kishori. And Prabhupada would try to tell them to move, but, you know, they were so, you know, this is the Lord himself in this wonderful form of Srila Prabhupada, you know. This was the flavor we were all tasting. As far as I was concerned, it was how I felt, you know. And they'd reach with their left hand to get their beads, and sometimes one devotee, I remember, he said, "So what are the principles?" And he said, "Well, don't eat after dark," or something like this, you know. Everyone was so nervous and so ecstatically discombobulated. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to present themselves. So I'm watching, you know, pay obeisances to the side, you know, and reach with my right hand, the 4 regular principles, 16 rounds. Okay, I've got this, you know, I'm going to do this right, you know. So I'm walking, and then when I'm called up, you know, I'm walking, and I'm 4 regular principles, 16 rounds, you know, the right side, right hand, you know, and I'm making sure I remember all these things, you know. So when I walk up there, I was so intent to say these things to Srila Prabhupada that Prabhupada picked that up. And he knew that I was anxious to tell him everything. And so he sat there looking at me, and I'm sitting there waiting for him to ask me. And he's sitting there waiting for me to tell him. And I'm sitting there waiting for him to ask me. Finally, he smiled and he kind of a little chuckle, you know. He says, "So what are the regulated principles?" You know, and I mentioned to him them, and then the 16 rounds. And he took my beads from the microphone stand. He's looking at me for a minute. Then first, there's always been the smile. From the very beginning, he had this little grin. Then he gets real sober for a minute, and he goes, "Your name is Radha Kunda," like this with his eyes, you know. And the whole room, it was like 4th of July or something. Ooh, ah, jai, whoa, you know, it was like this, you know, 500 devotees going off, you know, because we just heard about it. So that was my very first actual association with His Divine Grace. Then the next day, he came in, and it was the evening time, and he asked that the devotees, you know, he started this 2/4 beat, this sound that we'd never heard before, and it's Srimad Bhagavad-gita class in the evening, and he starts with the kartals, with his eyes closed. Parama Karuna Pahundvijan Nitai Gauda Chandra. His eyes being closed. There was maybe only Dear Krishna and maybe 1 or 2 devotees out of all of us that even knew the song. All the rest of us were all dumbfounded, all waiting to, you know, have this concert from Srila Prabhupada, you know. And Prabhupada kind of comes out of his samadhi, you know, and he looks around and he goes, what? You don't know this song? Tomorrow you will know this song. And he went right, put the cartels down, and got right to the class and went right on, you know. So we're all feeling a little strange about that. And the next day, of course, Balavanta, who was in charge, and Rupanuga, they were the head men there in those days there, you know. And we all had Xerox copies of the song for the next day, and so Prabhupada comes back out again, and he's Parama Karuna, and we're singing along with him. But as only the first stanza, and then Prabhupada stops, because Paramahansa Swami at the time, who was the one in front there, was playing the mridanga. He had no idea how to play this mridanga, because it was this 2/4 beat. It was different altogether. So he says, give me the mridanga. And being Satsarup's man, you know, he nudges me and whispers to me, he says, wow, this is the first time Prabhupada's played a mridanga in years. So not only is it a spectacular moment in life, but it's also now a special moment, an exclusive special, you know, that Prabhupada's going to play the mridanga, you know. So he gets this mridanga, and in Atlanta it was very humid there. So the mridangas had this plap, plap, bank, bank sound. You know, they were horrible. They had no tone, no nothing, you know. And so he's like, what's this, you know, like that with this mridanga. Well, Dear Krishna goes off, and he comes back with a Satish Chand mridanga, you know, 1 of 5 that was only made of that quality. And he comes in the room, you know, walking it, you know, through the devotees, and brings it up to Srila Prabhupada. And it too had a little flap, flap, bang, bang sound to it, you know, because of the humidity. Well, this was the first miracle that was performed in front of all of us. And he put that mridanga in his lap, and he goes bong, and he goes bang, bong, 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 bong. Just by the tapping of his hand, Sri Mridangam came into tune. Bang, bang, bing, 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 bong. And then he starts to do this again, you know. Parama Karuna, boom, boom, Pahundri Jan. And of course, you know, he's our hero, you know, and he's just conquered the mridanga, and that was, you know, and he had that look on his face too, that he had figured it all out, you know, and everyone's just roaring, you know, that, you know, Prabhupada's so victorious in everything he does. It was so cool, you know. And then there's a little bit of a class, or like in Sunday feast, and it happened to be Sunday too. And he's giving this lecture. Well, there was this Christian woman there, and she kept interrupting Prabhupada, you know, saying, well, it says in the Bible that Jesus is the only way. And Prabhupada would say, yes, the teachings of Christ are the only way. One has to surrender to Guru. One has to follow these principles of religiosity, you know, like this. And was humoring her. Meanwhile, the devotees are just snarled up, waiting to just get the cue to just toss her out, because she's like really clogging the toilet, you know. And there was one Sikh person who called out and says, in our scriptures there's no mention of Krishna, but we worship Govinda, Gopal. And Prabhupada said, yes, that's good, we just worship Govinda, Gopal, that's fine, you know. And then this woman butted in again, probably for the 3rd time. And Prabhupada interrupted her and says, have you seen Krishna? Have you seen God? Well, no, you know. Then why are you speaking? Don't speak anymore. And then, of course, all the devotees, Jai, yay, you know, now all waiting for her to say something. So they've got the cue now, you know. So they're waiting for him to say, you know, for her to say anything, because now she's being tossed, you know. Of course, she left at that point, but that was also very neat, because Prabhupada was caught in an awkward social situation. It's a Sunday feast. The place is packed not only with devotees, but with guests, news media, everybody's there. And here's this woman causing disturbance. And I was feeling for Prabhupada, how he was going to handle this, you know. And of course, the victory man as he is, you know, the personality he is, you know. On to the Sunday program, and where Prabhupada gave he was actually doing the puja for Bhaktisiddhanta. I'd like to also note that when Srila Prabhupada came in the room for the greeting of the deities that morning, they had Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada's Vyasasana established, and Pushkar's painting of him in the chair, sitting there, full size, you know. And Prabhupada always kept his head tilted and away in this mood as a child sitting in front of his father. That his mood was actually that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was there. His whole mood was being very humbled. I mean, he was humbled. He was like you know, and only looking over to make sure everything was perfect and that there was no problems, you know. But not sitting there like it was a statue or a painting, but actually sitting there as if Prabhupada was actually there. That's my reference to Prabhupada's eternality, is that, you know, the way he treated his Guru Maharaj, even though it was in the form of a painting. And you know, he's chanting very nicely and everything. And then he gets off the Vyasa-san to do the puja. Well, in the setting up of the puja for the conch shell, of which he offered 3 times, and there was no receptacle, there was no bowl for him. And the devotees, of course, are all chanting as loud as they can, you know, the Hare Krishna mantra at this particular time. And being Satsvarup's personal servant, I got to be right up front. So consequently, Srila Prabhupada was no farther than 2 feet away from me. In his full form, I'm standing right in front to his side as he's doing the artik, the puja. I'm watching everything about him. And when he got to the point where he was using the conch, and he's looking down and he sees that there's no bowl, well, in the roar of the kirtan, no one can hear his voice, but he looks over to the door that's on into the temple, and Rupanuga and Balavanta are over onto the side over there, and he looks at them and with his lips makes out the term, "I need a bowl," like this, you know. Well, all of a sudden, these guys start roaring out, "Hari Bol, Hari Bol," and got the whole room start chanting Hari Bol, you know. Well, Prabhupada looks at them, and, you know, and you could just see that the expression on his face, what do I have here to work with, you know. It was really a funny moment, you know. And so in order to be continuous and keep the flow going, there was a Tulsi Devi that was perched up there next to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, in this very haphazard, lazy, sloppily way almost, if you will, takes the conch water and just tosses the water. Well, being right there in front, I watched this water. And this water came out of that conch shell in a perfect stream and circled around Tulsi Devi, not even splashing her. I mean, this was 3 feet away and about 4 feet high. It was all the way at the top tier of the, you know, the Vyasa-san as it laid out, you know. Probably just went like this and continued throwing this water. But this water is not it's a perfect stream landing. Miracle number 2. I'm overwhelmed by the reality of what I'm seeing. It's not really within the laws of physical nature here, you know. And I was just, wow, you know. But I think there was more of a romance at this point of Prabhupada, of who he was in regards to the leader of the movement, you know, the personality by whom I've been initiated by, but not convinced to the core of my heart that he's actually a pure soul, you know, in complete communication with Paramatma, the Lord Krishna, within his, you know, face to face. I don't think I've really appreciated that this is a reality. I'm thinking, well, it sounds good, we should think like that, but I don't think so, you know. Well, when it came to the point where the conch shell was to be blown, it was a little conch shell. The hole for blowing was not properly made, and the pujari later mentioned how, or earlier rather, mentioned how they grabbed the wrong conch shell. This won't work. You know, it hardly works for me. I'm a young boy, 20 years old. I can figure it out. But, you know, so when Prabhupada, and the whole room had a certain mood of like taking a breath and kind of waiting to hear them blow this conch shell, you know. And this is where my atheism came out. This is where I didn't believe. And I thought, well, this old man ain't going to be able to blow this conch shell. Well, Srila Prabhupada took this conch shell. And again, mind you, I'm right there. I mean, as the crowd's even pushing, and I'm leaning back to keep from his elbow, you know, bumping into him, you know, I'm this close. And so I go right to his chest to see him take this breath and try to blow this conch shell. He takes this conch shell and just puts it to his lips. There's no breath. He doesn't take a breath. He just, ooh, ooh, I mean, 3 times perfectly. Miracle number 3. At that point, I realized that he was a pure devotee outside the laws of nature. That was really the most amazing thing. And then the morning walk, that morning, perhaps the next morning, we're on a morning, my only walk that I'd ever got a chance to be on. And because of being with Satsvarup, I think had a lot to do with it. And I remember I was directly behind Srila Prabhupada. I mean, you see his 3 wrinkles on his neck, you know, and the tilt of his head, you know, and the quickness of his cane, and his step, you know, I'm sure you've heard this and it's been on all your tapes, I'm sure, a million times, but his gait, his walking, you know, was always appearing to be so smooth and soft and relatively slow for a gentleman of such an age, you would think. But that's how it looked. But when you actually got to the walking with him, you're finding yourself taking an extra quick step to stay up with him. He was actually walking really fast, which was really a surprise to me, because I just, you know, it just didn't look like that's what we were doing, but I found myself having to keep up. And of course, when Srila Prabhupada would stop to answer a question or comment, some philosophical point or something, you know, all the devotees, of course, want to hear. So I was always being pushed from behind into Prabhupada, you know, until everybody, you know, so they could listen to him, you know, speak, you know. And I found myself leaning backwards, you know, to hold back running into Srila Prabhupada, you know. And at one point, some devotee who I don't know, and I wish I could remember, because it was because of him I got a direct instruction from Prabhupada. But it was some galoot type guy, some guy who was real big and tall and kind of goofy, and on a morning walk in Mayapur. I mean, in the days when you think that a person's initiated and God made it all the way to India, that he at least knows the basic fundamental philosophical points of Krishna consciousness, like Krishna being blue and all these things. And this fellow, he says over my shoulder, you know, Srila Prabhupada, is Krishna really blue when nobody's around, you know? I mean, the whole walk, people were, well, actually, Srila Prabhupada immediately stopped, you know, and he turns around, and he's looking right at me, and with this look of disgust on his face, you know, angered, actually, you know. And I'm like, you know, standing there, his face is this far away, and I'm like trying to eyeball and vibe that it wasn't me talking, it was that guy, you know. But he turns and he looks at me and he goes, "Just read my books, like, you idiot," you know. And then with this disgust, and then turns around and continues the walk. Right when he turns around to start walking, I stepped on the back of his shoe. One of my best days in life. First of all, I'm getting sauced as if I'm this galoot. And then on top of that, as he turns to start to walk, I give him a shoe flat, right? Well, there's Guru Creep and Chutananda and everybody. They're looking at me like they just want to kill me, you know. First of all, because Prabhupada looked at me, everyone assumed, unless they actually were there close enough to relate to the fact that it wasn't me, thought it was me. So I'm just looked at and then stepped on Srila Prabhupada's shoe, you know, and, well, you can imagine. Then there was another time in Vrindavan, Mayapur, the Radha Madhava Mandir, actually, the Sri Chandradoya Mandir. And Prabhupada was just finishing his class, and at the time, the Gurukulis, boys and girls, were all in the front from Prabhupada's Vyasasan. They were the first ones in the line, you know, keeping that aisle for Prabhupada to look and see the deities. Well, I was the next kid, the next big kid, next to the children. And Prabhupada was coming out, and he was patting all, you know, some of the kids' heads, you know. So I bent my head down, you know, like this, and hoping, you know, and Prabhupada laughed, you know, and he patted me on the head. Well, it's a procession. Prabhupada's on his way, en route to the Radha Madhava deities to go around the house there and ring the bell. And of course, after touching my head, I paid my obeisances. Well, when I got up, there was Brahmananda standing there with this serious look on his face, you know. And I'm, oh God, what are you doing here? You should be en route, you know, with everybody else. And in my thoughts, you know, and he stood there and he goes, "I've been waiting for Prabhupada to pat me on the head for 10 years. And still he hasn't done it." And then he walked and went on, you know. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, that he'd stopped to make the point to tell me that, you know. It was pretty neat. It was in L.A., 1977 was the last time Srila Prabhupada was in L.A. And I guess he was there about a week or so. I can't really recall, but he was, he had his own door at the L.A. temple. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but in L.A. there's an alleyway, and there's a side door that comes right down the steps from Prabhupada's apartment, which is above the deities there. And they would come in, and he would come down, open this door, step out onto the little patio area there that they have in the alley, and a car would be waiting, and he would take on his morning walk. Well, for some reason, again, you know, all the devotees are out in front, facing Prabhupada's door, you know, whereas I'm on the side of the little steps that he's coming down on the side. Well, when Srila Prabhupada opened the door, everybody, of course, Jai Srila Prabhupada, you know, and everybody, of course, pays their dandavats. Well, I didn't wait for the Jai Prabhupada part. I just went ahead and Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Sai Prabhupada and jump back up again, because I don't want to miss Prabhupada's form at all, ever, you know. And in all the different times I'd ever been around and seen him, I was always right up front and never looked at anything else, really, except for a moment. Anyway, he comes out, you know, and as I was paying my obeisances, Prabhupada's coming down the stairs and he goes, Hare Krishna, in this real dark, deep voice, you know. And as I heard that, and as I'm coming up, I don't know, I didn't mean to, really. It just came out, but I mimicked him. And I went, Hare Krishna, because it sounds so cool, you know. And oh God, what have I done? I just sent myself to hell. I just made Guru Maha Opera. I didn't know what I was very, very scared, very freaked out. I thought that was it. I ruined my life, you know. Prabhupada would look over at me and say, get out, you know. Well, to my surprise, Prabhupada, you know, as I'm getting up and I said this, and you know, by this point, he's like standing in front of me, about to get in the car. And he looks over at me and he clenches his fist and he goes, Jai, like that. And then gets into the car. Yeah, with the fist and everything, you know. And I went, you know, holding my breath, having to change my clothes, you know. I mean, I was overwhelmed by what had just taken place, you know. But that was a certain sense of humor, I thought, that Prabhupada had, you know, because he appreciated that I wasn't being sarcastic, you know. It was just that it sounded so great. I just wanted to say it, you know. Jai Anilo Premadana Karuna Prachu